I grew up in an abusive family. My father was the, you know, the main focus of the family. He was the breadwinner. That was the idea of the time. My mother stayed home, raised the kids, cleaned the house. My father was the breadwinner. It was that king of the castle syndrome.
I wasn't raised in an abusive family. You know, my father was an honest, hard-working man. My mother was a nurse and also a reverend, and so it was something that I just didn't see it at home. I saw it in the neighborhood and I saw it in other families. First time that was real clear, I was 18 years old. I had joined the service and had, not too long before that, had got married. And it was more or less, she was my wife and to do with what, you know, I please, you know. And so, and the argument was like relatively something simple, you know, it wasn't serious. It didn't warrant that type of action, you know, for me to physically beat her. I physically beat her like man on man in a boxing ring or, you know, a street brawl. You know, I just was hitting her in the stomach and the sides and the back and the head, top of the head, pushing, throwing, slamming. My first real relationship that I had was like shortly after I got out of high school. And yeah, I became violent with this person. In fact, one of the things I can remember with this woman that I dated, she was a year behind me in school. I graduated in '71, she graduated in '72. Then she went to college just outside of New York City, one of the state universities in Newburgh, New York. And I ended up moving down there to be with her. And we had physical confrontations. I'd shove her around, I'd grab her by the shoulders, and I'd push her this way or that way. And there again, too, there was one time when we had a physical confrontation where I was hitting her with a shoe or a sneaker or something. I think it was a sneaker, that kind of thing. And you know, eventually that relationship deteriorated. The pattern of violence goes all the way back to, I think, even in relationships with my sister and my mother. Going back to like even the mid-'70s when I was in my early 20s, 22, 24, that neighborhood. I had struck my mother, but my mother and father had separated then. I think the abuse, as far as physical abuse on my sisters goes back to when we were, you know, as a family unit living at South Glens Falls, New York. You know, I've hit my sisters. Back in those days, I didn't strike my parents, you know. And the reason I didn't strike my parents and the reason I did strike my sisters was more of a conscious rationale. If I was to ever hit my father, I knew it would be all over for me, okay? If I was to ever hit my mother, it would be all over for me. My father would come down on me like a ton of bricks. But if I was to hit my sisters, you know, maybe I'd face a grounding or something, or more than likely a scolding. You know, you don't hit your sisters, or you don't hit girls, blah, blah, blah. You know, you don't do that, kind of scolding kind of thing. And like I said, maybe some other consequence of a grounding or something, you know, relatively minor, really. The day-to-day was more of just verbal, you know, attack. That was more or less like what I lived for, you know, to come home and like, well, I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna say that, and just to see what kind of, you know, response I get, you know, was kind of like, and then if she acted in the way I thought she was gonna, then I would laugh, and I was like, see, I know, you know, I know your every move, I know what you think, I know it before you know it. And so, and then it would, from there, it would range up to slaps, to, you know, physically hitting, to I guess the most serious is when I tried to run her over with the car. I'm on my second marriage, a little over 9 years. Have 3 boys. My family life with them, as far as before I got into the program, was probably much similar to the way it was for me when I was a little boy.
everybody walked on eggshells and, you know, danced around my moods, you know. Nobody did anything or suggested anything or would think about anything like that unless they had an adequate understanding of what kind of mood I was in that day. In other words, if I was in a grumpy or what, you know, that's the term they would use, like, oh, Dad's grumpy or something like that, you know, don't bother him kind of thing. But the point is that more or less everybody lived their life evolving around me. We were living in an apartment complex that was kind of like our apartments faced each other. So we just started dating, and you know, and I played the real nice guy. I was actually even kind of caretaking kind of a role thing, but always striving to be pleasant. Wanted to make that favorable impression, kind of a situation, and it stayed like that until the relationship started to gel up a little bit. As we became more involved, we moved in together. I would slam doors or break things, and then, you know, and eventually, you know, resulting in assaulting her. Okay, probably because it wasn't a solid relationship yet. In other words, there was still that, you know, to do that, then she would just back right out completely. You know, that wouldn't work. That tactic wouldn't work at that time. But and I don't know. I'm trying to remember if whether or not I actually physically assaulted her before or after we got married. I almost have a tendency to think it was after. I'm not sure. I would grab the top of her head. I remember that being like one of my more common tactics. Okay, I would grab by the hair like this, and I'd shake her head. Okay, forcing her to look at me. Okay, and then sometimes not. But I would hit her like with my open hand across the face or something like that. I do remember one physical confrontation where I was hitting her with a shoe. I was kind of like spanking her, hitting her over the head and then across the back because she was trying to, you know, guard, you know, or block the blows kind of thing. And I was hitting her with a shoe one time. But the first time was more of a case where I'd grab her head, you know, and then, you know, and I'd strike her with my hand, either in the face or in the shoulders or you know, the upper body areas. Yeah. And you know, how many physical confrontations we had, I don't think I could put a number to that. I think the one that I remember the most is because I have a child by that marriage too, and her and her sister had gone someplace, and I was waiting for them to come back so I could go to work, and I had no idea where they were, how long they were taking, whatever. You know, they got home late just in time for me to go to work, basically. And my first wife had our son, who was just a baby at the time, and I chased him around the apartment complex, and I tried ripping the baby out of her arms. You know, we were actually playing tug of war with this little child, and a lot of screaming and yelling and hitting, and you know.
It was domestic. You know, it's between a husband and a wife, and at that time, the husband is supposed to control his partner, and it ranges from, you know, from then up until my last partner, that, you know, is like, you know, you need to control it, take in the house, do whatever you have to do to, you know, to keep this matter in control, you know. And I always done what, you know, the police officer, you know, asked me to do. You know, I'm like, well, here's more justification, you know, to continue on doing what I was doing. I would do whatever the police officer would ask me. You know, if he said, take her in the house, and, you know, you need to keep this between the two of you, do you need to keep it inside the house? And I'm like, okay, well, he's telling me what I need to know, so I won't get in trouble. So if I keep it in the house and I'm not seen, then this is reinforcement for me to continue on abusing my partner.
That it was no big deal. And that's the way I looked at it. That's the way I looked at it. It wasn't like a real big deal. I mean, you know, it wasn't like I'd committed a crime or something. That's basically how I looked at it. It wasn't like, you know, we had an argument, you know. Everybody has a personality, and you just more or less, you just pick it up. You know, it's like, well, I know what to say that's going to work with this guy. I know what to say what's going to work with this guy. You know how to pick up triggers and little things to, you know, to make people associate and identify with
what's going on in your situation, you know. And I would throw a lot of different situations out at random to see which one would catch that particular officer's, you know, eye or whatever you want to call it. And then it was just more or less, and then, you know, then we're more or less like male bonding. And then there's my partner over there by herself, and she's screaming for help and not getting it.
Oh, I'd have been the victim, you know. They've been out lollygagging around all day. They've been out farting around all day. You know, I'm the breadwinner. I got to get to work. You know, these people are going to make me late. They knew I got an obligation. They had a responsibility to be back here at a certain time so that I could get to work on time. And, oh, yeah, I could go right into the whole victim role, you know. And it was her fault, you know. It was all her fault, you know. And then she came home and she didn't even try to apologize or anything, whether or not she did, you know what I mean?
I had beaten my last ex-partner, and the police were called. And I had messed her up pretty bad. And I let her call the police. You know, I didn't try to intervene or whatever. And so I went and got into bed, you know, and played like I would sleep, you know, as I was talking. And she wasn't feeling any pain either. She had been drinking, you know, also, you know, and I was too. And so when, you know, the officer come, and so when my ex-partner was, you know, asking the police for help, and I was more or less, then I came out, and I was like, you know, well, you know, I played like, you know, I've been at work all day, I'm hard, and I just stopped off at the bar to have a couple beers, and, you know, which, you know, none of that was true. And so I was talking to him, I was like, you know, seeing what, you know, all she does is just sit around here and just get fucked up all, you know, all day long, you know, she probably doesn't even realize what she's saying, you know. And I said, well, you know how drunks are. And so that right there clicked as soon as I said drunk, you know. And then the officer turned and started yelling at her, like, you know, you need to shut up before I arrest you, and take your ass in the house. You know, these are like quotes from the police officer. And I was like, you know, I don't know what I'm gonna do. You know, I tried everything, you know, short of breaking her neck, you know, to get her to understand that, you know, this is not, you know, this is not going anywhere. And so that was kind of like the seed. And then I didn't have any more trouble out of any of the police officers, you know, so they were maybe called, God, I don't know, maybe 20 times, and it was always the same thing. You know, it's like they knew the number, they knew the address, and it was always her fault as soon as they arrived. You know, I've used machetes and other different weapons, you know, on my ex-partner. You know, as far as spanking and stuff, they would take the machete, but you know, they wouldn't take me. They never arrested me.
Basically, when I came home, I parked the car and I went upstairs, just meandered my way right back to our bedroom and flopped on the bed. And was pretty close to just passing out when I heard my partner mention something to the boys, well, your dad's drunk again, or something, you know. I could tell she was real angry. And as she was rounding the boys up to leave, like they were gonna head out the door, like, let's get the hell out of here or something. Your dad's drunk, something like that. I came off the bed in a rage. And I grabbed the head of the hair again. I started beating her about the face, and you know, just shaking her head, beating her, and yelling at her, and screaming obscenities to her, and just, you know, and striking her with my hand. And she struggled, and she finally got away, and she went running downstairs to the manager's office. I remember getting in a fight with the manager then too. You know, I remember I actually pulled a gun on him. Okay, but instead of shooting him, I hit him in the head with it. Okay, and then we argued and we fought. Okay, and we rolled downstairs, and then we fought all over the outside of the yard, this type of thing. And then the police were there, and it was like, you're going to jail. I remember being in my jailhouse greens. They ankle cuffed me and handcuffed me in the whole 9 yards. And I remember the magistrate looking at me and telling me, he says, you know, that he called me a menace to society. I still feel, you know, a great sense of guilt and remorse. Now, why over that one assault over any other assault, The only thing I can figure is the amount of consequence that I had to endure over that assault, okay? What really, because the fact that I was, first of all, for the fact that I was facing a felony, okay, that put my mechanic's license in jeopardy, okay? You cannot be a convicted felon. You cannot work on aircraft. A convicted felon cannot do that. I would have lost my aircraft license. I would have lost my career, my family. You know, I was looking at some really heavy consequences here. For the first time, you know, the world took me by the collar and said, "Wake up, Harry. You know, you're not going to get away with this. That this is morally and legally wrong."
I had came to a point in my life where I just didn't give a damn anymore because I broke all my own rules. And I was going after another guy across the street for stealing my tools, and I had a baseball bat. And my intention was, you know, to beat the hell out of this guy, you know, for ripping me off. My ex-partner came up behind me and tapped me on my shoulder, and it doesn't seem like I thought about it, but I spun around and I grabbed her by her neck and choked her till she passed out. And this was outside in the front yard, and during, you know, like 3 o'clock in the evening, something like that. And that was in full view of everybody, something that I had never done before. And the police would call, and this was the one time there was, you know, an overwhelming amount of witnesses. I hate to use the word bent, but that seems I was more or less like bent on destroying her. And that, I guess, you know, I came to the point where my rule book didn't matter anymore, and that I was going to achieve what I was going to achieve, you know, at all costs. They need to take some form of action to make sure that that woman is safe and those kids are safe, or whatever. Something has to be done. They can't just come there and say, well, it's their problem, they need to take it in the house. Because if that had been done years ago, maybe I wouldn't have been here now. Maybe I wouldn't have, my abuse wouldn't have got totally worse, and, you know, to the point of, you know, shooting and fracturing and, you know, breaking things and, you know, breaking bones and going to the hospitals and, you know, eventually getting arrested. You know, maybe if, you know, if you'd done anything, just anything, you know, in the beginning, you know, to maybe it could have put a stop to it. Maybe stop at least one person.
It would seem to me that probably the singular greatest deterrence for a repeat offense is to hold the batterer accountable. That arrest and conviction, okay, can have the greatest impact. Promises of "I won't do it again," or "I'm sorry," or the victim, you know, that's another thing to watch out for. Watch out for the batterer that's the victim. This ain't gonna get it. I've done that. I did that for over 20 years, you know, and all it told me was I could get away with it, and all it told my partner was that I could get away with it. If these guys start going to jail, start spending some time in jail, if you know, if there was some way to increase the amount of time they had to spend for repeat offenses, okay, I think that would work. That would work.